Hello, Professor and classmates. Today I will introduce you three recent cases concerning maritime delimitation. The first is Romania against Ukraine case, which carried out the delimitation of continental shelf and exclusive economic zones between the two states in the Black Sea by establishing a single maritime boundary. After that, I will spend a few minutes talking about Peru against Chile case and Somalia against Kenya case. At last, I will make a conclusion on the new tendency in the maritime delimitation dispute and the delimitation methodology. Here is the first case. The Black Sea is an enclosed sea connected with the Mediterranean Sea by the Straits of the Dardanelles. The Black Sea has a surface area of about 432,000 square kilometers and consists of the territorial seas and exclusive economic zones of the coastal states. The continental shelf is rich in oil and gas resources. The maritime area to delimit in this case is located in the northwestern part of the Black Sea. Romania and Ukraine have serious differences on it for a long time. On the 16th September 2004, Romania filed an application to the ICJ against Ukraine concerning the delimitation of the continental shelf and exclusive economic zones in the Black Sea. On the 3rd of February 2009, the ICJ rendered its judgment. The red line is Romania's claim, while the blue line is Ukraine's claim. The black point in the northwestern part of the Black Sea is very important in this case. It's a natural feature called Serpent's Island, which belongs to Ukraine. Serpent's Island is above water at high tide, have a surface area of approximately 0.17 square kilometers and a circumference of approximately 2,000 meters. The first legal question is about the court's jurisdiction and applicable law. Romania seeks to found the jurisdiction when the two conditions in the compromissory clause are met. For the first condition, no agreement was reached between the parties in the past 6 years. For the second condition, the said treaty has already entered into force on the 27th of May 2004. The two parties are in agreement that all the conditions for the court's jurisdiction were satisfied. But the two parties have differences in the exact scope of the jurisdiction. You may find more information in my report. Both Romania and Ukraine are parties to the 1982 Convention. Articles 74 and 83 of UNCLOS are relevant for the delimitation of exclusive economic zone and the continental shelf respectively. These articles are as follows. We can note that paragraph 4 provides that where there is an agreement in force between the states concerned, questions relating to the delimitation of the exclusive economic zone and the continental shelf shall be determined in accordance with the provision of that agreement. According to these articles, to examine the existing agreement related to the delimitation between the states and make sure whether there already exists an agreed maritime boundary for all purposes is the first step of dealing with substantial issues. It refers to a series of process verbal and treaties on the regime of the state boundary between Romania and the Soviet Union from 1949 to 1974, as well as 2003 State Border Regime Treaty between Romania and Ukraine. The court points out that the 1949 instruments related only to the demarcation of state border, which around Serpents Island followed the 12-mile limit of territorial sea. The 2003 treaty just fixed the endpoint of the state border between the parties, at the point of intersection where the territorial sea boundary of Romania meets that of Ukraine, the point referred to by the court as Point 1. Although the 1997 Additional Agreement is the only agreement expressly dealing with the delimitation of the exclusive economic zone and the continental shelf, it doesn't establish a boundary but rather a process for arriving at one. Consequently, there is no agreement in force between Romania and Ukraine, delimiting between them the exclusive economic zone and the continental shelf. After that, the court declared itself bound by a three-step approach laid down by maritime delimitation law. It will begin by drawing a provisional equidistance line between the adjacent coasts of Romania and Ukraine, which will then continue as a median line between their opposite coasts. At the second stage, the court will consider whether there are factors calling for the adjustment or shifting of the provisional equidistance line in order to achieve an equitable result. Third, it will verify that the said line does not lead to an inequitable result by reason of any marked disproportion between the ratio of a respective coastal length and the ratio between relevant maritime area of each state by reference to the delimitation line. In keeping with this approach, the court first established a provisional equidistance line. In order to do so, it was obliged to determine appropriate base points. Serpents Island calls for special attention. It lies along and about 20 nautical miles away from the mainland. To count Serpents Island as a relevant part of the coast will amount to grafting an extra element onto Ukraine's coastline. The consequence would be a judicial refashioning of geography. So, at the first stage, the court has already determined that Serpents Island cannot serve as a base point for the construction of the provisional equidistance line. The court now, at the second stage of the delimitation, ascertain whether the presence of the Serpents Islands in the maritime delimitation area constitutes a relevant circumstance calling for an adjustment of the provisional equidistance line. According to the jurisprudence, the court may decide not to take account of very small islands, or decide not to give them their full potential entitlement to maritime zones, if such approach have a disproportionate effect. So, Serpent Island should have no effect on the delimitation in this case, other than that from the rule of the 12 nautical mile arc of its territorial sea. Besides that, the court considers 5 other factors: the possible disproportion between lines of coasts, the enclosed nature of the Black Sea and delimitations already effected in the region, the conduct of the parties, any cutting off effect, and certain security consideration of the parties. However, the court does not see in these various factors any reason that would justify the adjustment of the provisional equidistance line. At the third stage, the court checks that the delimitation line does not lead to any significant disproportionality. The ratio of respective coastal lengths for Romania and Ukraine is approximately 1 to 2.8. And the ratio of relevant maritime area is 1 to 2.1. The court thinks the line does not need to be adjusted. The first sketch map is Romania's proposition for the relevant coast and delimitation area. The second is Ukraine's contention as to the court's opinion on the determination of what constitutes the relevant coast and relevant area. You can refer to my report from page 8 to 11. The court decides that the line of the single maritime boundary should start from point 125 until it reaches the area that the rest of the third state may be affected, which is shown by the purple line in this map. The second case is about the maritime dispute between Peru and Chile. On the 17th January 2008, Peru filed an application instituting proceedings against Chile concerning a dispute in relation to the delimitation of the boundary between the maritime zones of the two states in the Pacific Ocean. Peru argued that no agreed maritime boundary exists between the two countries and asked the court to plot a boundary line using the equidistance method in order to achieve an equitable result. In this case, the court deals with the following questions. Firstly, to ascertain whether there is an agreed maritime boundary by examining a lot of agreements and finding that the terms of one of the binding agreements acknowledge that a maritime boundary already exists. Then, the court analyzes the nature and extent of the agreed maritime boundary, concluding that the boundary is an all-purpose one. The court also follows a three-step approach in this case. For more information, you can refer to my report page 17 to 21. As for the third case, Somalia instituted proceedings against Kenya in 2014 before the ICJ, asking the court to determine the complete course of the single maritime boundary, dividing all the maritime areas appertaining to Somalia and to Kenya in the Indian Ocean. But due to the postponing of public hearing, the substantial issues haven't been judged yet. Now come to the conclusion. There are various types of maritime delimitation in the light of the object to be examined. However, the types of maritime delimitation are not always separate. In the above cases, the dispute between Romania and Ukraine concerns that to establish a single maritime boundary delimiting the continental shelf and exclusive economic zones. While in Peru against Chile, Peru asks the court to confirm an all-purpose boundary line, and in the last case, Somalia requests to determine a single maritime boundary as well. Seeking a single or unitary maritime boundary by states reflects a new tendency in maritime delimitation dispute. This tendency firstly arises in the Gulf of Marin case, which dealt with the delimitation of both the continental shelf and fisheries zones of Canada and the United States. But we should note that, although the basic rules for delimitation of the continental shelf is the same as that for the exclusive economic zones, but it's not necessary to get the same boundary, and the criteria for a single maritime boundary are not those that related to only one, but that would apply to both. Therefore, to establish a single maritime boundary, need to consider and evaluate a range of relevant or decisive factors, which causes difficulties in predictability and enforceability. But the recent cases have seen moves towards the formation of the equidistance and relevant circumstance rule by the ICJ, which is a convergence of the equity principle and equidistance rule, and also a refinement of Article 74 and 83 of the UNCLOS. First, construct a provisional equidistance line unless there were compelling reasons preventing that. Secondly, consider whether there were relevant circumstances which may call for an adjustment of that line in order to achieve an equitable result. Thirdly, conduct a disproportionality test, assessing whether the line leads to markedly disproportionate result by comparing the ratio of coastal lands with the ratio of relevant maritime areas. As to the relevant circumstances, it is a combined concept with a wide range of connotations, including natural and human factors, and new factors are constantly being added by case law. For more information, you can refer to my report. That's all. Thank you for listening.